Hey everyone, my name is Francisco Escobar and welcome to the second season of Conversamos. This season starts our It All Starts at Home edition, where we're going to be focused on conversations on La Familia and Latinidad. We hope you enjoy.
Yeah, yo, is it that wrong? I'm making a song, I'm taking it back for the platform that I formed. Music helping me transform. I run the reservoir, the predator, like a hungry carnivore. When I'm breaking through these heavy doors, this is Desert Storm. A metaphor to show I'm equipped and informed. I'm striking with the mega force.
We have an expert panel ready to discuss their experiences growing up and raising as a first-generation immigrant. But first, we'd like to give a big shout out to Juan P. Esquivel from Chicago for hosting an excellent podcast called Economics and Latinidad, where he interviewed various Latino-owned businesses throughout the country. Come check it out. Now let me introduce you to our panel. We have Osiel Gonzalez, Natasha Pineros, and Michael Marroquin. Thank you all for joining us. And now with our first question, how would you describe your experience as a first-generation immigrant? And if you have children, how has that experience influenced you in raising your kids?
I thought it was normal, fun, sometimes a little stressful because things were a little different. And it was, I was just still having like a great time. Moving around, I'm an East Coast baby. So I'm going from New York, Miami, no change, you know. There's still people of color around you. There's still Latinos around you. So Miami to me wasn't different. But going from Miami to Greenville, South Carolina, well, that was a big change. And I think that was a big influence on my life because, it taught me kind of like how there are different types of Latinos in the United States. There's the New York Latino, there's the Miami Latino, two different dynamics there. And then it kind of introduced me to the kind of Southern Latino. And that's a big part of what I am, a Southern Latino with some New York, Miami, I don't claim it, but, there's still part of who I am. But internally growing up, it was the same thing, like probably a lot of first generations deal with. You deal with some old school, you deal with some culture stuff, you celebrate stuff that's from back in the country. Your parents are still partying at other people's houses and you're sleeping in the couch at 3 a.m. and you're like 5, and I just thought that was just normal. And, you're going through this life of kind of like a duality. I go to school, I'm especially it was a lot like in South Carolina, a lot of non-people of color around me, but then I go home and then I'm back in kind of like Latino mode, like, talking to my grandma, my dad in Spanish, my mom mixed and doing these things that other people I never, I'll be like, in my house, we don't do this, we do this, and non-people of color were just like, oh, okay, that's different, that's interesting. So, it was a lot of like duality, but, at the end of the day, it was, like I said earlier, it's to me, it was just normal. I don't regret anything. And I would describe it as what I think is normal.
Yeah, so my experience is different. I think as an immigrant, as a young immigrant, I battled feeling resentful and gratitude for having to mature so early and having so many responsibilities. Was the only one in my family to be fluent in English. I went to a bilingual school back in Ecuador, and I had traveled to the United States a lot before we permanently moved. And so from the moment we arrived to the airport, I was the language broker, and I was the one that would translate correspondence, attend doctor's appointments, advocate for myself in school. I felt a lot of resentment for being different, for having these responsibilities when I got home, and not wanting to identify as Latina. So I first moved to California. We lived there for about 6 months, and then we moved to New Jersey. And I remember in high school, I would tell people that I'm coming from California and not from Ecuador, when clearly I have been in the country for and then I started getting more in touch with my Latinidad. And I attended a community college where I met other Latinos who were loud and proud. And I started getting more in touch with my culture. And there was no hiding from it, right? In high school, I was the president of the Spanish Honor Society. I would host the Hispanic Heritage Month programs in English and Spanish. Yet I would still try to avoid that identity of mine really hard. Once I attended college and I started meeting like-minded individuals who got me out of that hole, and I'm grateful for that, I then started feeling grateful for my ability to be able to be that language broker towards my family. I think it changed my role in my family very much. I'm the youngest one in my family, but I'm the one now who people consult with before they make decisions in my family. And I think that stems from moving here and being the only one who was able to navigate the language in this new world.
Being an immigrant comes with a lot of aspirations and a lot of dreams. And sometimes you're hit with a kind of culture shock that smacks you real hard, and you begin to realize that you have to make your own way. It's not going to be given. It's not easy. It's not laid out for you. I really identify, and this really resonates, what Natasha was saying about being a language broker and also being a culture broker. And, having my mom, she wanted me to like barter with somebody and haggle with someone. And I'm like, that's not, it's a supermarket. Like, what do you really want me to haggle here? And so feeling a little self-conscious and resentful, but also feeling the urge and the pressure to learn, to explore the American culture. And, when I moved here, I lived in New York and in Queens too. And so very diverse place, a lot of people that I never had imagined I would meet, like folks from the Middle East, people from Jamaica, different Hispanic folks with their idiosyncrasies. And I always wanted to keep that stance as a learner and learning from others and learning about others. But the culture shock was real, and it was very educational. Even though I am an immigrant, there is a generational divide between my folks and myself. And my stepdad came to this country when he was 6 years old from Cuba, but still there is a generational divide. And we interface with technology, or how we view current events, and how we really perceive the world in a lot of different ways. This notion of the melting pot comes around every once in a while. And I always like to say that in a melting pot, sure, you become part of the thing, the soup, and you gain something, but you also lose something. When I go back to Cuba, it's evident that I've lost some things, but I've also been enriched by the Latino community here, because, and Cisco, this, I never learned to dance. I never knew about Buena Vista. I never knew about Guaguancó and the rich Afro-Cuban history and culture in my own country, because I was a part of a very insular community. And so coming here was an eye-opener. When I interact with other Cubans, with Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, other Caribbean people, Central Americans, learning about pupusas, learning about curtido, give me that. Let me get that. I'm about that. So I just think this is the place. This is the place to raise a child like that. Triple culturally, or more just sort of unique, but hopefully very confident in their ability to code switch. And I'm hearing that from Michael. You get home and now you're back on Latino mode, and it's more like, it's a proficiency. It's a skill. I used to feel bad. Like, who am I really? But I'm all of it. I'm all of it. If I'm in a job interview, I am kind of tapping into that code. If I am chilling with my dudes, we're speaking another code, and it's just a proficiency, so I don't feel any kind of tension there.
Going to Lucia's point about being a language broker, my thing was, so my mom was, like I said earlier, my mom came here when she was 10 years old, learned English, she grew up in Brooklyn, she learned English, all that. So, growing up, I would talk to my mom in English, and, my dad's Spanish, but my mom mixed, I could talk to her in Spanish and English. But during my younger years, my mom grew up, she's a nurse. Nurses work, strange hours. They don't always work the typical 9 to 5, 8 to 4, you know what I mean? And so during some of my younger years, my mom would work 7 p.m. to 7 a.m.s. And that's an all-nighter. Or she would be working, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So my dad understood English. He's been here since the 80s. But talking, he is a heavy accent. So he would have to tell me what to say, and then I would have to tell the doctor or whoever I was with, and it would be like, oh gosh, okay, here, oh, my dad says this, oh, but he would understand what the person was saying to us, so there was never like a kind of a back routine. It was more like a bam to bam. So there would be those situations, but other than that, if my mom wasn't available, my mom was available, she was kind of like that main point of contact because she knew everything about my family, financial, medical. She's a nurse, she got to know this stuff. But when it came down to when she wasn't available because she was working, sleep, resting, it would either come down to me or my little sister. And so, but for me, it was like, I didn't have to, but when I did, I was thrown into the lion's den, and I had to learn like quickly, like, okay, like, what do I say here? I had to learn stuff, medical jargon that I never knew before about insurance, about, co-payments at a young age, because, my dad didn't know anything about that. I didn't know, but they're asking for co-payments.
Yeah, I had to speak with landlords. And that like back and forth between having my father demand something and me not wanting to sound rude and tell the landlord was a whole dynamic. And that prepared me for conflict management, for difficult conversations. I somehow got hired to work as a legal assistant for an attorney for 3 years. So it was a part-time job that I had while I was in high school and college. So one, that opened a can of worms for my family to think that I knew what I was talking about, or for them to think that I understood the English language enough to then translate it in English when it came to legal documents. But on the other side of that, I think it gave me more confidence to know about tax returns and help my family navigate that. And then when it came my turn into my adulthood, it definitely prepared me for that. I'm not afraid of health insurance, right? I think a lot of my friends, once we left college, they were filing claims for the first time and doing things with their car insurance and health insurance. And I've been doing this my whole life, and like while I've been here. And it starts even with the FAFSA application for federal student aid in college. Those were processes that I did on my own. And then my dad next to me, so he can like give me his social security number and his signature, right? But it definitely prepared me for adulthood.
Thank you, Natasha. Yeah, Michael, can you relate to this experience? If so, how?
Yes and no. I was generally a really shy kid when I was younger. So asking me to talk to a total stranger and my dad telling me something, no, it didn't help me. But with, again, my mom, she grew up in the United States, so she was a very like, I'm gonna put you in things to learn about your future. But it wasn't until I was going to college that's when I started learning how to, wash my clothes, learn a little bit how to cook, because I was the oldest male in the family, so I was kind of taken care of a little bit. But it wasn't until like after college and after I graduated, I knew what the heck's what's health insurance, what's an FSA, what's an HSA. I don't know what that is. Like I thought my health insurance paid all of my stuff. I didn't know I have to pay? Like, what does that mean? And I'm over here going to my mom, like, Mom, what is this? Like, and I'm 21, 22, going to the doctor by myself. Like, Mom, what am I doing here? Like, do I go to a free clinic or do I go to a really expensive doctor? But these guys are asking me for $150 copay out of my paycheck.
Thank you, Michael. And for our next question now, for the sons and daughters, what lessons have you learned from your mother and her father? And for the father here, what messages are you teaching to your children? And we're going to start off with Postre.
I learned a lot from my mom growing up. Certainly, my exposure to literacy was the Bible and a community of Christian people. And, as you get older, you get to question, you get to critique, but you also get to acknowledge that you end up learning a lot of great principles about treating people fairly and maybe sacrificing for your family and being a stand-up guy. There's always this tension between tradition and innovation, and I try to create a synthesis from it. I don't want to completely escape tradition, but I also don't want to be too high on innovation. So I want to kind of walk at my own pace, walk my own line, as it were. From my parents, I learned, to respect your elders. A lot of funny things like, no se habla con la boca llena kind of things. And they seem simple, but they apply to your overall life. And so as a daddy, I just want to get the best things from all the cultures that my son has a heritage from, and inculcate those things. He has a lot of very rich traditions that come from his African side, and I always want him to be very proud and aware of those and practice those. And also from his Cuban side, it has to do with music, it has to do with food, but it also has to do with how you treat people.
I want to reiterate what Osiel was saying about just like no se habla con la boca llena, like you help wash dishes, right? That's just like part of our culture, and things that was a culture shock when I came here, and my friends would walk in and not ask if my parents were home so they can say hi, or they would be okay opening each other's fridges. That was just beyond me, right? But I think something important that my parents taught me is the importance of education. So that was very important for them to inculcate in me while we were in Ecuador, and that became my only constant in my ever-changing life when I moved here. I was also able to take advantage of all of the opportunities I had educationally, because I was raised with a mentality that I can do whatever I want. So despite being a part of a machista society, my parents never told me that I couldn't do anything because I was a woman. In my life as a student, while with their support, I ran for student government several times in my elementary school, and that was normal for me. And that set the tone for me to follow up with leadership opportunities throughout my whole life. But when I came to the United States, it was the first time that I learned about the wage gap and the gender gap. And I was shocked. I was like, what do you mean I don't get paid the same? And that's thanks to my parents and the ideology that they put in my brain that I can do whatever I want and I deserve the same as everyone else.
Thank you, Natasha. And Michael, what messages have you learned from your parents?
First is my mom. She would always tell me when I was younger, growing up in school, Michael, be someone in life. Be someone. That's what I want you to do. I want you to go out there and make a name for yourself. I want you to have that individuality. I want you to think. I want you to be out there and make your own money and be out there and learn and to just don't be so closed-minded, and that always stuck with me because that's how my mom was. She was very progressive with a lot of things. And she stuck that into me and my sister. Just be someone in life. Like, don't slide into the background. Like, my dad, it was a little bit more emotional because, my dad came from El Salvador, which is a very tough place, coming to the United States, moving to New York. And, he was a teacher. He had a degree in teaching in El Salvador. But, coming to the United States, that doesn't mean nothing. Like, degrees don't mean it. From other countries don't mean nothing here. So he had it all his life up to this day. He's doing manual labor. So he always told me, he said, like, don't be like me. He said, he always said that education was important because he said, I don't want you to be like, he's like, I don't want you to have my hands. I don't want you to have rough hands. I don't want you to be growing up doing manual labor. I want you to get an education and I want you to graduate and go to school and get a degree. because I don't want you to be like me. You know, he tells me, like, I'm 55 and still doing manual labor. I don't want you to do that. You know, I want you to pay for someone. I don't want you to manually, you know, change your brakes in the car and like I did all my life. I want you to pay someone to do it. And I want you to be better than me. And those two things just always stuck with me. And that's what basically just created my work ethic. And I'm always going to remember those
Question. What messages have you learned from your parents about your culture? And what cultural messages and teachings are you sharing with your child?
My mom always taught me to treat women very well. And even though I'm coming from not just a culture, but specifically a subculture in Cuba of gender roles and female subordination, my mom is really kind of, you know, the one that made it happen for me. She was a single mom when we came to the States. My dad was in Cuba. She's the one that delivered me to freedom. That's for one. And she always taught me to treat women well, not just as questions of respect, but questions of courtship and appropriate courtship and how to be a gentleman, how to, you know, open doors and things like that. I know that can be controversial here and there, but I appreciate it. I appreciate being exposed to it. And also academic achievement, big thing. And I remember my mom sitting down with me at some point. You know, I had many times when I was kind of on the edge of losing my way. And my mom sat down with me one time with my grades, and she said, "Yeah, these are good and all, but are they the best? Are they the best?" And I'm like, "You know, they're not the best, but they're good enough." And she's like, "I want you to be the best. I just want you to be the best." And that was tremendous pressure for me, but in retrospect, I appreciated that pressure because I needed it at that point. I needed to occupy my mind with productive things. You know, we were in the inner city in Boston, single mom, not exactly the best economy at home. So there were other opportunities, let's just say. My culture really growing up was just the Christianity, really, just a kind of a bubble, Christian bubble. I grew up in a farming town, milking cows at 5 a.m, and the culture was hard work, God. That's it. God, hard work, God, family. And those are important, but the more surface level items of music, dance, food, I think these things I've discovered here, you know, and I've actually enjoyed teaching them back to my mom a little bit.
Thank you. Yes, and Natasha?
I think I want to preface my answer by recognizing that a lot of the lessons and messages that I learned from my family about my culture, I am currently actively trying to unlearn. And what I mean by that is that while I am very proud of where I come from, of my culture, I think, like Osiel has mentioned, like the freedom of learning in this country has also helped me realize that I have the freedom to unlearn gender norms instilled in me and my family, religion norms instilled in my family. And I feel very grateful that I have this space to challenge those ideologies in my inner circle with my family, and I can challenge them with their ideology. Like I said, my role in my family has allowed me to do that. On the other side, I think because we are immigrants to this country, and we're not the minority, we're minoritized in this country, but we are a large group of people, specifically where I'm from in New Jersey, New York area. I hold on to the music. I hold on to the food. We travel to Ecuador regularly, and I'm very proud and very vocal about where I am, and I share with my friends and family here and there. I've learned to be proud of my language. And despite being a native speaker, I minored in Spanish in Ecuador. I'm very vocal about being bilingual, and it's opened up doors for me professionally and personally. And I'm unapologetically Ecuadorian and Latina and Spanish speaking and Spanglish speaking. And I think that comes from my family and the pride in my culture. if I figured it out. And now that I'm back, I moved back with my family after graduate school. We like clash in what we want to eat and what I started making out of my life and out of my diet, right? Because it differs from what we eat at home. But in general, I think I was able to feel like I was ready for that because of the hard work they instilled in me. They instilled in me this sense of self-sufficiency because I'm smart, because I know how to speak English, because I'm a citizen, and I can ask questions and I can learn how to do things. On the flip side of that, I think because I think I'm so self-sufficient, I'm not good at asking for help. So it kind of backlashes. But in life, I feel prepared because I think that I can do anything I want to, thanks to the hard work that my parents instilled in me.
I think both my parents taught me what they knew. And in terms of my dad, he taught me a lot of what Jose was talking, like the quote unquote manly things was, you know, changing the tire, helping him change the oil. You know, he would wake up at 8 a.m. I remember in Miami, and I had to wake up with him, 8 years old, 9 years old, having him to help change the oil because he didn't want me lazy. You know what I mean? But I still kind of learned like, okay, that's how you change oil, or hey, that's how you change a tire, something like that. You know, he taught me kind of things like that. Kind of like physical, like manual labor-ish, because that's all he kind of knew. You know, I know how to mow a lawn and I know how to cut everything and all that. And I think for my mom, it was a lot of like learning on the go with, you know, certain things. You know, again, when I went to college, I went to the University of South Carolina. I started washing my own clothes. My mom had to literally get a pen and paper and write it on a piece of paper. Hey, this is how you fold. This is how you clean your underwear. This is how you clean your shirts. Your polo. So specific. And I had to learn. You know, there was a lot of like, let's say experimenting, because I had to learn on the fly. Like, okay, what happens if this happens? What happens? Like, what is this? And so, but again, it was like, they taught me all they knew they could. And yeah, it sometimes wasn't enough in adulthood, but I still had the privilege of just giving my parents a call and be like, hey, mom, dad, what is the copay? You know, what is this? Like, I don't know what are these taxes? What do you mean rent? Like, well, I knew what rent was, but I was like, what do you mean renters insurance? What do you mean health insurance? What do you mean car insurance? You mean none of this is paid for? Like magic? So now I gotta, okay, what's a savings account? What's a checkings account? I don't know this. I thought money just goes to your bank and you can use money, whatever. And they had to sat me down, 22 years old, making my money in my first job, and they had to explain to me, this is how money works. This is how you think everything was provided for you, and no, this is hard work, and you're learning. And that's where I kind of started appreciating it, because at a young age, you're like, oh yeah, this is all magically happening, you know? But when I'm 22, have my first job, make my own money, you know, they're sitting down, they're like, this is what we had to go through. Now, but we can teach you so that way you're not like us and learning how to figure this out by ourselves. So I think they taught me as much as they could, and they're still teaching me to this day. You know, I didn't learn what I didn't know what an FSA was until 25. I'm 27. You know, so I'm still calling them saying, what is this? What's a loan? What do you mean interest rates? You know what I mean? So
now, navigating with learning and applying English and Spanish seems to be a common theme in all your stories as first-generation immigrants. At times, there's this aspect of subtractive bilingualism where you lose your first language trying to acquire another. Have either of you experienced this? Or to even broaden the question, how have you navigated spaces when faced with U.S. Anglo assimilation?
Yeah, I've evolved on this topic over the years. Definitely kind of had a subtractive mindset initially. I needed to kind of put sort of mute my Cuban self for a bit, or I felt that I did in order to assimilate. And I've always been concerned with language and my accent and proper pronunciation, etc. And I think that's it's been it's not been an issue. It's not something that causes tension within me. It's more of like a challenge, like an intellectual challenge. But then again, I studied language in high school and college, and I teach immersion, so I'm kind of wrapped up in those questions of language. As far as assimilation, and I know it's become kind of a dirty word, I just go back to the idea that you have to you give something and you lose something in the melting pot. Right? It's almost like it's not so much a melting pot, it's more of a chemical reaction. A melting pot is just things are heating up. But a chemical reaction, there is a synthesis going on, and it's who you are or who you were, plus your new experiences, and that yields a new self. So it's kind of your thesis, this is who you are, then different things, your antithesis, and now there is the new you, which is a synthesis. And I've always felt grateful for that opportunity. But I as I've grown older, I do realize that there are norms in society that are folks are expected to follow them, and these are the norms of power. And so but following them is more a question of proficiency. Again, okay, I understand them, I know where I have to follow them, I know where I can subvert them. And as a dad, that's what I want my kid to be able to do. And it's to feel he can be his full self and his best self, and to know that there are things that are different about him, that even, he's not fully Latino, he's not fully Black, he's not fully anything. He's just sort of this unique individual, and I want him to embrace that and for that to be a source of power for him.
Thank you, OCL. And yeah, Natasha?
Thank you for bringing that subtractive bilingualism. I had to look it up. It's the first time that I hear it. And I think it's happened to me, right? So as much as I've tried to stay away from assimilation and rather enculturate into my Ecuadorian identity, again, like once I moved into my college years and I realized what was going on with me, then like I held on to my culture for my dear life. But as I advanced my education and I acquired new language, I started losing my Spanish. I minored in Spanish in college. I went to study abroad in Spain to continue my language. And my language is very advanced, right? Colloquially, because of how I grew up in my family, but then also what I was learning further in college. And then I moved away for graduate school. And again, this new language, this focused language that I was learning for my graduate program took away from the energy that I was putting in to keep my language in Spanish. So now that I'm back home, I have to try harder to talk about these grander issues that are important to me, systemic oppressions, right? Like, and all these fancy words that I know in English that I care so much about, but I can't translate them in Spanish, and it takes energy. And I'm insecure about it when I talk to my family because I want to have these conversations with them, but I can't. Or it's harder. And when I talk about my career, it's hard to talk about it in Spanish. So it's something that I can do, but it's just something that takes more effort. And in me, I feel like it shouldn't take effort. So it's like relearning these things that, of course, I didn't know as a child what systemic oppression was. So learning it in English, and now I'm relearning it in Spanish, has been a whole journey. And I think it's a part of me assimilating into maybe, I don't know, academia in the culture of the United States, and having to navigate academia in Latin America and in Spanish, or in Spanglish, because like Latinx, for example, is like a very American term. Latina is something that is being adopted in Spanish-speaking countries. But yeah, it's a whole mix of push and pull with that lately.
I don't know. It's kind of difficult for me to assimilate. I don't know, because me being a 6'10" Latino dude, well, people always look. I'm tall, and and of course, I'm lighter skinned, so people usually look up to me and they're like, "You're not white, but I don't know what you are," And I have to tell them I'm Latino. And to be honest, my Latinidad goes with me everywhere, in terms of how I speak, how I move, everything. And so when navigating these spaces, I'm consistent throughout the board, because it's just an important part of who I am. Now, understanding now, it's kind of interesting to, again, kind of like Natasha, you're learning about systemic oppression, Latinx, all of this. And I'm not shy about talking to my parents about any of this, but I know, to be honest with you, they're kind of not concerned about any of that. When I go home, we don't really, like, do we talk politics and who we were going to vote for? Yeah. But when it comes to like a lot of the nitty gritty stuff, they're not, to be honest, their focus is more on, we're going to keep working, we're going to make our own money, and we're going to retire, because this was our dream coming to the United States, to retire, live peacefully, enjoy what we own, that we worked hard for over 30 to 40 years, and leave. So I don't really have, coming home and then going through those spaces and bringing it back isn't really an issue. But I carry that Latinidad like everywhere. Like Spanglish, I have a group of friends. We smack talk with and we do it in English and Spanglish, or sometimes Spanglish. And that's something that we all have in common, because we're all either first generation or we immigrated at a young age, and And that Spanglish follows me everywhere, even my current job. We actually have 3 Latinos in my team. And I'm always, once I found out, I was like, oh man, like this is who I am. I'd be like, just speaking to them and like saying Spanish phrases, saying crazy, that's who we are. So for me, it's just like, I don't know, assimilation is just a hard thing for me to do naturally.
Now, pushing this conversation further, would code switching or assimilation even come up or matter if we as Latinos would be the owners and or the employers of the businesses that we're in? And how would having conversations on cultural competence shift with an economic competence frame of mind? Yeah, Natasha?
I don't think we're ready for that conversation. I think bringing it back to being called minorities rather than minoritized, like, that's on purpose. Like, I don't think as a society the United States is ready to understand how immigrants to this country, how Latino immigrants to this country have pushed the economy forward, and how the labor force of this country is immigrant. So to have them consider that our social mobility is just as important as their white kids who they forced to go to college, I don't know. I don't think we're ready.
That's not happening anytime soon. It's just, I don't know. It's a tough question to answer, really.
I think something to consider, sorry, Michael, I think something to consider is also that we have been fed this, like, from my perspective and like what I was raised with, we've been fed this idea that the American dream is the goal of this white picket fence and a house and a dog and children, and we all go to college and get married. This idea comes from capitalism, right? And capitalism makes us compete with each other. So within our own culture, we're competing against each other. Colorism, for example, makes us compete against each other. Who's lighter? Who's more fair skinned? Who's prettier? Who's more worthy? And until we start breaking these things down, we're not going to help each other out, help build each other's credit. right? So I opened up a credit line for my brother to help him with his credit. When I started researching how to do this, other cultures do it, other families do it, but we distrust our own family members so much that we wouldn't do that for each other. We don't know about that.
I think
I think it goes beyond like just the United States, and it goes into our household.
I think to go off of that, I think we're just kind of that the American dream. I think has like kind of changed. That was for our parents. That's not for us anymore. You know, our parents looking from the outside in was all of what Natasha said. You know, getting a house, getting married, having kids, dogs, good life, good education. That was their dream. And then their dream for us, the American dream. I think for us now is just like, now that we're kind of more educated, I think is to promote that, and like helping each other and kind of creating kind of our own generational wealth, because that's what my parents are doing. And I didn't even realize it until probably this conversation, is that like my parents, they you know, they own their own house, they have their own cars, they do this, they're doing all that, and they're keeping it for themselves. They don't really talk to their other family members about all their personal stuff and or any other members of the community. They're just kind of keeping it to themselves. For me and my, you know, for me and my sister, you know what I mean? And they're not telling anybody how they're doing it or what's the best way to do this. So I think that's just it's just crazy. You know, to share that, we need to start sharing that type of information. Like, what the heck's a 401k? Like, okay, here you go. Let me help you out with there. You know, oh, credit increases? Yeah, man. Like I've started hearing about people be like, oh, I know a good person that'll help you with your credit. You know, oh, and this person's Latino and is good. I'm like, that's great. Like, because I've heard a lot of my African American friends, they're like, they know somebody. I'm like, damn, what about us? Like, okay, what about Latino or maybe a first generation? Maybe I can relate. But here we are.
Whether it's Operation Condor, military coups in Central America and Chile, amongst other U.S. interventions, isn't it a trip that we have Latin Americans coming to the United States for supposed freedom when the U.S. have been involved in the very freedom that they prevented others from sustaining in their own homelands? Could someone help conceptualize this?
Cycle. I think it's a product of colonialism, like modern day colonialism. Then they make us feel like it's our fault and we have to flee our rich land because of the fancy things that they have.
And then try to be like them.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with like what happened because I understood like, you know, there was a civil war back in El Salvador in the 70s, and I can be corrected. I really haven't ever done it. I just heard, but I know like the U.S. I know sent several military groups to, you know, back one side against these other groups, and I know like, you know, the U.S. has some sort of little bit of a nasty opinion about the U.S. because they're still kind of holding the grudge from back then and be like, we know what you did, and look what you did. Now look what you've done to us. We're one of the, I know El Salvador is one of the poorest countries in the world, and we have the U.S. dollar as a currency. You know, and it's just I think I agree. Now that you make me think about it, it kind of is a trip. It's like, that's crazy. Now that I'm like kind of wrapping my head about that.
And in terms of ideology as well, I was having this conversation with my dad the other day about how society tells us the idea that we need all the latest car, the latest phone. But then at the same time, because of your hard work, you feel like you deserve it, and that makes you feel good. But that's because society has sold you this idea that these fancy things make you feel good. And so if we try to bring it back to our land, why is it that we think now that we're in the United States that this was the end goal? Like, this is the life you want to have. I've had the opportunity to travel to different countries, and I went to this self-sufficient community in Guatemala where they were up in like a private reserve in a mountain. So they had their own water. They made their own electricity through the water that came down the mountain. The community members were the teachers, and they led the clinic, and they didn't want to leave. They had colleges come all the time and help them repaint their schools and stuff, but they didn't care for anything else but to continue cultivating their lands and preserving that the area where they were in. But we've been sold the idea that we want the fancy things. We want to go to different countries to help them paint their schools. But that's a result of imperialism, like you said.
With that said, that's all the time that we have. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in this conversation. For everyone at home, make sure you like the video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on all our social media outlets at LatinEntertainment_presents. And also, you can listen to us on a various podcasts as we have broadened out to various mediums as well. Lastly, tune in next week to discuss growing up and raising male Latinos. See you next time as Latin Entertainment presents Conversamos.
Yo, is it that wrong? I'm making a song, I'm taking it back for the platform that I formed. You should help me transform. I run the reservoir, the predator, like a hungry carnivore. When I'm breaking through these heavy doors, this is Desert Storm. A metaphor to show I'm equipped and informed. I'm striking with the mega force, I'm lukewarm, your crew swarms. With the fear, my lyrics do harm. If you ain't lending a hand, I'm breaking your two arms, so listen. I'm sniffing the difference on my mission, I'm craving. I envision these premonitions like Raven, I'm gifted. I saved it, now it's time to shift to my haven. My advanced pacing remains in a basin where I'm chasing pavements. Straight erasing with this pen, I'm embracing, no more time wasting. Ready to rise like your crime raiders, that's where my mind state is. I travel time and space and deliver my rhyme invasion. My kind of greatness, got me in the sky, I'm pacing. I'm Pacquiao, so knock me down, I'm far from wasted. Far from basic, lock me down, just a target waiting to rip apart the matrix. Fuck the slow motion. My emotion is pumped by my explosive motives. So let these niggas know I'm finna blow. Spit the sickest flow, nothing but corrosive. It'll enter your soul and now your mind's a new hostess. Hosher, been doing this since my adolescence. I was blessed with strength bars like I was bench pressing. I wasn't man infested, but now I manifested the stresses and invested into my effort. Create my own path for me to venture. Yeah, they calling me a masochist, cause any pain inflicted I just bask in it. Pain is weakness, leave it, and I ain't running after it, I laugh at it. I'm passive with my actions, nothing's holding me back from this passionate path I'm in. Till I manage to damage the animus, I captivate anything on my head, I'm going to animate. I'm trying to fuck a chick with a body straight out of anime. The downfall to Anakin was trying to save Padme. I try to stay ahead so that these moments no longer pass me. Opponents trying to blaspheme me, try to disrespect me with the blasphemy, but I regenerate like a master chief. Actually, I'm casually casting, magically jumping, grabbing the fucking apple tree and making this shit a habit beat. Don't try to sabotage the guard, cause y'all in the background with the camouflage on. I crack down on y'all with the smackdown, I'm raw. So anybody that I attack now is gone, cause I'm the Don, the Don.
Cross mountain range.